Depending on where you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. So there are people here from all around the world. Sorry to hear it's 1 a.m. in New Zealand. That's kind of grim. Thank you everybody for attending, and again, thank you so much to the sponsors, to the organizers, CERNET, and to the sponsors, Google and Microsoft, for making this possible. I've now been working remotely for about 4 years since the pandemic, and I must admit, I'm kind of getting used to virtual conferences. I used to travel quite a bit, and now I don't so much, and I miss meeting people in person. But it's meeting people over Zoom and having a virtual conference is the next best thing. So it's great to see everybody. It's great to meet everybody, even virtually. Let's participate as much as we can during the chat. And I'm really looking forward to a great 2 days worth of presentations. So I wanted to talk about something that happened recently, which I'm guessing that most people will be aware of, that affects open source greatly. And that is, and I'm going to use the American phrasing for it, the XZ attempted hack of an open source project. Now, if you're not familiar, essentially a hostile actor managed to take over an open source project that was not widely known, but very widely used. There's a comment. There's a comment in the chat that I miss the Cartouffle House in Göttingen. This is true. I do. I also missed a very uncomfortable beds in the hotel. Okay, someone else has joined. Actually, that's unfair to the Freizeit Inn. The Freizeit Inn is very comfortable. The food's good. It's just that I was always jet lagged when I was there. Anyway, yeah, the attempted takeover of the XZ project. If people aren't aware, it was essentially a social engineering campaign to hassle and bully a maintainer who was having some problems and was the sole maintainer of this project, into stepping down and handing over maintenance to people who turned out to be hostile actors. Now, no one actually knows exactly who these people were. It's quite likely that they were a team from possibly a nation state who wanted access to this project. The reason they wanted access to this project was that it was being linked in to actually a lot of different other open source projects. It was a foundational library for mostly the thing that they were attacking was SSH, which of course is the main encrypted communications channel that is used for many purposes in the open source and in the commercial world. Attacking that allowed them to essentially have an open port into just about any managed server in the world. And the thing about SSH is that the ports for SSH are very commonly open on the open internet. So what lessons does this have for open source in general and Samba in particular? Well, for Samba in particular, we don't usually run over open ports on the internet. Samba and SMB are usually kept behind firewalls on an internal network. Having said that, the data that Samba protects is of some of the highest value data in the world. And I'm talking about Samba as an Active Directory domain controller. And essentially, that holds the crown jewels of an organization. It holds the authentication and passwords of every user who's in that domain. So Samba is actually quite a high value target. It is being used in governments for on-premise Active Directory, just like Windows is itself. And so it's actually quite dangerous if someone were to gain access to the Samba project, if someone was able to get commit access. We could, there but for the grace of God go we, I think is the lesson we should take from this. Now, what this means for open source in general is we really need to take a step back and examine our procedures and the way we accept code, how we accept code. Now, Samba is lucky, well, not lucky, has well-designed procedures, I feel. And I think over the years, and I remember Volker especially pushing for 2 peer engineer review, the fact that we will only commit, we will actually only commit code that has been 2 engineer reviewed by members of the Samba team, is somewhat of a defense for us. Having said that, members of the Samba team are usually overworked, don't always have the time to step through code as carefully as they might. I'm guilty of this myself. After starting my new job, I've had much less time to do code reviews and new code work. So we really have to be much more careful around what we accept and who we accept it from. Now, having said that, as we're an open source project, we do get essentially anonymous Gmail accounts submitting code, even with sign-offs, the correct copyright assignments, everything that we need to claim the copyright rights to the code. But we're going to have to be much, much more wary about the quality of the submissions that we accept. Remember, the people who attacked XC were probably nation-state actors, and it looks like the only reason they got caught was that they rushed things at the end, because there was already a work in progress to remove the dependency on XC from OpenSSH via the Linux vendors. So they rushed it at the end and they botched it up. They managed to cause a 500 millisecond slowdown in logins that was detected by Microsoft, a Microsoft engineer, which is wonderful, who was working on Postgres. So thank you to Microsoft for sponsoring that. The next time we may not be so lucky. The next time it may be really, really high quality code with a logic flaw that is very, very hard to spot. So I'm not 100% sure what we can do other than really be vigilant for incoming code. And I'd like to say from people who we don't know, but the truth of the matter is it could be people that we think we know very well, because that's what happened to the XC maintainers. These people were actually helping maintain the project, had been submitting code contributions, some of which were actually of reasonable quality, before they unleashed their attack, and before they actually implemented their backdoor into the system. So, lessons for general open source. I think we need some help with this. And the fact is that open source is everywhere, is in every single project, and is essentially increasingly valuable to commerce, government, and is an integral part of every IT infrastructure. So I think we shouldn't be averse to reaching out to our commercial and government partners and asking for help. I believe that Europe has some initiatives about funding open source projects, critical open source projects, So does the Linux Foundation in the US. They will fund critical open source projects. I think we should possibly think about reaching out to some of these organizations and asking if they can help sponsor us, asking if they can help review our procedures, which I believe are good. But I'm very frightened of Samba appearing on the front page of all the IT and in fact the main newspapers with a similar disaster. Now, we've had some disasters in the past, unfortunately. Some of them so bad that you might think, my God, our nation state couldn't have wanted anything easier than that. Some of which were caused by me, unfortunately. So we kind of have to learn to raise our game and make sure that we review our procedures and be essentially eternally vigilant, because what we have is very, very valuable. What we have protects some of the most sensitive data in the world, and we need to really take care of it. So not only do we need more contributors, we need to be more vigilant about the contributions that we get. So there's no really great answer for this, unfortunately. If an attacker is persistent enough, they may end up contributing code of very, very high quality, fixing many, many bugs in order to lure a project into a false sense of security before they introduce a flaw that is very subtle in areas that they may previously have demonstrated great competence. So yeah, it's a problem. If anyone else has any great ideas, I would be very, very happy to hear them, discuss them on the mailing list, or even if anyone has any comments after this talk, because I'm probably not going to get to 30 minutes past the hour. But yeah, that was essentially what I wanted to talk about. And so there's no great answers to this. There's no great fixes for this. Many open source projects are in the same boat. Some of them, we're kind of lucky in that our procedures are quite good. One of the things I love about Samba is how paranoid Metz is about access to the actual release source code. So if you're not aware, we exist on GitHub. All contributions generally go through GitHub, but none of the actual Samba releases come from GitHub. The actual code itself is released from private servers, so which are admittedly the code contributions are then mirrored and checked into that private tree, but it's just one extra level of security in case GitHub gets compromised. Sorry, GitLab. I'm sorry. There are so many Gits companies that I sometimes confuse the two. I apologize to Microsoft and I apologize to GitLab. Microsoft, of course, owns GitHub. Yeah. So we do have some paranoid procedures there, which I think are very useful. But procedures alone won't save us from social engineering, and that really is the great danger. So yeah, I hope this was a wake-up call for everyone. The open source community got lucky in that this was found and fixed before it went out into general release. We may not be so lucky next time. And I think we need to be cautious, aware, and we shouldn't be frightened to ask for help. And if help means throwing money at the problem, governments have money, corporations have money, we should ask. we should apply to as many grants as we possibly can, and try and make sure that we get as much help as we can, because Samba and the Active Directory protocols and databases are critical infrastructure. So that's kind of all I have. If anyone else has any comments, I'm really looking forward to the rest of the presentations. And thank you everyone for joining. So that's kind of it from me. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Happy to take questions. I'm frantically admitting anyone I see coming into the waiting room. So,
Hey, Jeremy, this is Tom.
oh, hi,
Uh,
Tom.
how do we know that we're not already compromised?
Thank you for that very comforting thought, Tom.
Yeah, I know.
Um, that's a really, really good question. And the only way we could know that is if a third party conducted a complete security audit, I
Yeah,
think. Because if we were compromised in that way, we would have already reviewed the code. We have the two engineer review. Um, you know, if we are compromised, the code is already in there and we don't know about it. So again, if we can reach out to people who are willing to fund a security audit, that really would be the only way that we could find out if we were. Um,
not to
yeah,
sound overconfident, but Samba's a pretty well-run project. The
yeah. Thank
contributors
you.
are pretty well vetted, and
Yeah.
the team is, you
Well,
know,
you say the contributors are very well vetted. They're vetted by contributing quality code.
yeah,
So if one of them, but we don't necessarily know who they all are. We are a worldwide project. We have had contributions that have been vetted and included from essentially anonymous Gmail addresses. Now, this may be from companies who don't want to advertise that they're using Samba or helping develop it. We just don't know. So well vetted is in the age of internet anonymity is not what it used to be. It's not like getting security clearance. But I do get your point. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt. What were you saying?
Oh, I didn't have much more to add. I was just
Uh,
trying to give a little bit of support. But,
oh, thank you.
it's an open question. Just because we found one attempt doesn't mean another one didn't succeed in the past.
Exactly. Now, the likelihood of it getting into my guess would be one of the highest value targets would be the Linux kernel. Um,
Yeah,
so I
definitely.
wouldn't be surprised if there was something there already.
Oh yeah,
So
the XC the Udels hack seemed to require this binary blob, right? This unvetted
yeah,
binary blob being injected. We don't really do that in the kernel. Maybe the firmware stuff, but that's
yeah, it's
another
the
project.
firm.
But
Yeah,
it's I think it's raw code going into the kernel pieces. As a
yeah,
maintainer there, I try to take a look at everything, and I only squawk if I have an opinion. But
yeah.
I think a lot of people look at it there.
The rate of change of the kernel though is too great for one person to actually
Yeah,
keep
I
track
agree.
of.
Absolutely.
So it would be hard to make sure that there was nothing in there. And as you say, we're pretty well run. If someone were attempt to compromise us in the same way, they would probably have to spend maybe a couple of years contributing really good quality code before they were able to slip something past us, which is not impossible, but it's a lot of work. So I don't know. I don't know if we're worth it. Maybe we are. Maybe someone is already doing that.
Identity
Yes.
management, I think that's worth it.
I'm sorry.
Authentication and identity management, that component is
Yeah,
definitely worth it.
yeah. It is. It is a very high value target, and Alexander Patrikov also points out that there was attempts for a research project. I
Yeah.
say that to try and deliberately inject flawed code into the Linux kernel. With friends like that, you don't need enemies. So hopefully something like that won't happen again. But yeah, it is a worry. It is a worry, and I don't think it's a worry that we can solve on our own. So that's why I think reaching out for grants help. And again, it would never hurt to have somebody pay for a full security audit. Um, you know, so it's a matter of the more eyes on Um, oh, thank you, David. And a comment from
Eternal
David Mulder
vigilance.
in the chat. How do we know we're not already compromised by a social engineer that's just biding their time? We can't assume even team contributions are totally safe. Thank you, David, and my eyes are on you. Sorry. You did ask for that joke. And of course, I'm an obvious sleeper agent that has been working on this code for over 30 years now, just waiting. Actually, if somebody looked at my commit history, they would probably assume I was a sleeper agent with the number of bugs I've put in there. But
You're a highly committed individual.
I do assure you, it was completely it was pure incompetence, no malicious intent. Yes. So yeah, we don't really know. And the other thing this has damaged is the web of trust that is inherent in most open source projects, because the reason this community can survive and thrive is because we generally assume that people have good intent. And if we start to doubt each other, we only have to watch the movie The Thing to see where paranoia will lead you. The John Carpenter version. I actually thought about putting a clip from The Thing in there, but it's probably not conference time viewing. But that's a great movie if you're interested in paranoia and what it does to a group of people, for justifiable reasons in that movie. Anyway, yeah, well, I'm almost out of time. So thank you everyone for participating in this rather open-ended discussion. And yes, Alexander points out this may be the main result, is to sow distrust and among existing communities, and it certainly has. So yeah, all we can do is be vigilant and try not to damage our relationships too much. So with that, I'm gonna probably go and make some coffee and look forward to the next presentation.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, everyone.